The notification from Wells Fargo arrived while I was sitting on a worn couch in my campus apartment, preparing for my final exams. Important message regarding your trust account, the subject line read. My heart skipped. Grandpa Ellis's trust fund, the one he'd established when I was born, would finally be accessible to me in exactly 1 week on my 25th birthday. $250,000 that would wipe away my student debt and give me a fighting chance at medical school. I clicked the email, expecting confirmation details. Instead, finding words that made the room tilt. Unauthorized access attempt. Security protocols activated. Please contact our fraud department immediately. That email was the first domino in a revelation that would shatter everything I thought I knew about family loyalty. The bank's waiting room was all polished marble and hushed conversations. My heels clicked against the floor as I approached the desk, my student ID and driver's license already in hand. Rebecca Harlow, I told the receptionist. I have an appointment with Mr. Delaney in the trust department. She smiled pleasantly, typing something into her computer. Yes, Ms. Harlow, though I see your parents, Richard and Diane Harlow, are already in Mr. Delaney's office. Would you like me to let them know you've arrived? I froze. My parents? They lived 3 states away, in Connecticut. What were they doing here in Boston, in a meeting about my trust fund without even telling me? Yes, I managed to say. Please let them know. The receptionist led me down a corridor to a conference room with glass walls. Through the transparent barrier, I could see my parents sitting rigidly in plush chairs, their backs to me. Across, from them sat a man in a charcoal suit, his expression grave as he gestured to documents spread across the table. The door opened. 3 heads turned in my direction. Rebecca. My mother stood, her cashmere sweater immaculate as always, her face, a mask of composure that didn't quite reach her eyes. We were just discussing your trust. So I gather, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. Though I'm curious why you're discussing my trust without me. Mr. Delaney cleared his throat. Ms. Harlow, please have a seat. I believe we have some discrepancies to address. I took the chair farthest from my parents, setting my backpack on the floor beside me. What discrepancies? The trust officer slid a document toward me. This is the activity summary for the Ellis Montgomery Trust, established for Rebecca Ann Harlow, with funds to be released on the beneficiary's 25th birthday. He tapped a manicured finger on a line halfway down the page. However, as you can see, on March 14th of last year, there was a request to transfer the full balance, $250,487.92, to an account at First National Bank of Connecticut. I stared at the paper, the numbers swimming before my eyes. I never requested any transfer. No, Mr. Delaney agreed, his voice careful. The request came from the trust administrators, your parents, who have limited management authority until the transfer date, but not withdrawal privileges without documented consent from both the administrator and beneficiary. He looked pointedly at my father. Which is why our fraud department flagged the recent access attempt. Someone was trying to update the contact information for the beneficiary notifications. A memory surfaced. My brother Tyler calling me last Christmas, unusually interested in my mailing address and email. Just updating my contacts, he'd said casually. The silence stretched like taffy until my father broke it. Rebecca, we need to discuss this as a family. Privately. Mr. Delaney stood. I'll give you the room. But Ms. Harlow, as the beneficiary, you should know that your trust remains intact. Our security systems prevented the unauthorized withdrawal attempt. The assets are still here, still yours. He handed me his business card. I'll be in my office when you're ready to continue our meeting. The door clicked shut behind him. My father immediately leaned forward. Becca, this isn't what it looks like. I laughed, the sound hollow in the quiet room. Really? Because it looks like you tried to empty my trust fund, the one Grandpa specifically set up for me, without my Knowledge or consent? It looks like fraud, Dad. My mother's lips thinned. Your brother needed that money for his business venture. The microbrewery was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and the investors wouldn't wait. So you decided to steal from me instead of telling him no for once in his life? We weren't stealing, my father countered, his CEO voice emerging, the one he used when brokering deals that always went his way. We were redistributing family resources to where they were most needed. Tyler has a family to support. Tyler has a failed business degree and a history of get-rich-quick schemes, I corrected. And I have $120,000 in student loans from getting my biology degree because you two insisted I shouldn't touch the trust until after graduation. My mother sighed theatrically. We always planned to restore the money before your birthday. With what? I demanded. The massive profits from Tyler's craft beer empire that hasn't materialized in the 8 years since he dropped out of college? The flush creeping up my father's neck told me everything. There was no plan to replace the money. They had gambled my future on my brother's latest whim, just as they'd done throughout our childhood. Tyler's hockey equipment over my science. Camp. Tyler's car repair bills over my class trip to Spain. Tyler's fraternity dues over my honor society membership. The brewery is just experiencing some cash flow issues, my father insisted. Once they secure the distribution deal with Northeast suppliers, stop. I held up my hand, suddenly exhausted by the familiar excuses. Just stop. You were never going to tell me, were you? If the bank hadn't caught this, I would have shown up on my birthday next week to an empty account, and you would have had some story about market crashes or management fees. The silence confirmed my suspicion. I gathered my backpack and stood. I'm going to finish my meeting with Mr. Delaney. Alone. And then I'm going to make sure you no longer have any access to my trust. Rebecca Ann, my mother hissed, reverting to her full name discipline tactic. You're overreacting. Family helps family. Funny how that philosophy only ever seems to flow in one direction. I reached for the door handle, then paused. Does Tyler even know where this investment money was supposed to come from? Or did you tell him some story about your stock portfolio? My father's gaze dropped to the table. My mother's silence was answer enough. That's what I thought. You couldn't even be honest with your golden child. The door closed behind me with a soft click that belied the earthquake happening inside me. Family helps family. How many times had I heard that phrase? Every time I'd been asked to tutor Tyler through classes he barely attended. Every time I'd been told to let him win at games because his confidence needs building. Every time I'd watched my accomplishments overshadowed by his mediocrity. Mr. Delaney was waiting in his office, a fresh pot of tea steeping on his desk. Ms. Harlow, please come in. I took the liberty of preparing some forms for you to review. He gestured to the chair across from him. I sank into it, my legs suddenly unsteady. What forms? Options for securing your trust. Given the circumstances, I would recommend removing your parents as administrators immediately and implementing enhanced security protocols. The teacup rattled slightly as I lifted it. Can they be held accountable? Legally, I mean. That would be a question for the police or a lawyer specializing in financial crimes. Mr. Delaney's voice remained neutral, professional. However, as no funds were actually transferred, our system prevented that. There's currently no monetary damage, just an unauthorized attempt. I nodded, processing this information as I sipped the tea. Earl Grey, my grandfather's favorite. My grandfather was very specific about this trust, wasn't he? I asked quietly. Mr. Delaney's expression softened slightly. Yes. Mr. Montgomery was quite clear that this money was for your education and future establishment. He specifically mentioned medical school in his documentation. He hesitated. Your parents would have been aware of these stipulations. Of course they were. Grandpa Ellis had been the only one who'd ever seen me, really seen me, beyond being Tyler's little sister. He'd attended my science fairs when my parents were busy, with Tyler's games. He'd taught me to play chess and listened to my dreams of becoming a surgeon. And he'd established this trust, knowing I would need support that my parents might not prioritize. The steam from the teacup fogged my glasses briefly, providing a convenient moment to blink back tears. When my vision cleared, I reached for the forms. What do I need to sign? 90 minutes later, I emerged from the bank into the bright April sunshine, my trust now secure under my sole control with dual-factor authentication and biometric verification required for any future changes. My parents were nowhere to be seen, having left the bank shortly after our confrontation. My phone showed 6 missed calls, 3 from Mom, 2 from Dad, and 1 from Tyler. I ignored them all and walked to the nearest park, finding an empty bench. Beneath a flowering cherry tree, the petals drifted down like pale pink snow, collecting in delicate drifts on the pathway. What now? The medical school applications I'd been working on suddenly seemed like a real possibility again, rather than a fantasy. The crushing weight of my existing student loans wouldn't be compounded by hundreds of thousands more. I could actually afford the tiny apartment near Boston University Medical Center that I'd been eyeing wistfully online. My phone buzzed again. Tyler. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Hey, Becca." His voice had that forced casualness that always appeared when he wanted something. "So, have you talked to Mom and Dad today?" "You could say that," I replied, watching a petal land on my knee. "We had an interesting meeting at the bank." A pause. "Look, I don't know what they told you, but this business opportunity is the real deal. The brewery has incredible potential. We just need capital to scale operations. And you thought my trust fund was the perfect source for that capital?" "It's family money," he said, as if explaining something obvious to a child. "And family helps family," I finished. "Funny how I'm always expected to help you, but when I needed help with tuition, suddenly money was tight and I needed to learn financial responsibility." That was different. Tyler's tone hardened. "College is a luxury. This is a business? Investment." I laughed, genuinely amused by the absurdity. "A business investment? Right. Like the food truck venture in 2018? Or the cryptocurrency trading scheme in 2020? Or the house-flipping project in 2022 that somehow lost money during the biggest real estate boom in decades? Those were learning experiences," he snapped. "This is different. We have distribution channels, marketing plans, everything. Then, find legitimate investors. My trust fund is not your safety net. Mom and Dad already promised. It wasn't theirs to promise." The words burst from me, startling a nearby squirrel. "That money is for my medical school, Tyler, for my future. Grandpa Ellis left it specifically to me, not to fund your latest hobby." "Medical school?" he scoffed. "You're already drowning in student loans. What's a few $100,000 more?" And there it was, the casual dismissal of my dreams that had been the soundtrack of my childhood. The perpetual message that my aspirations were expendable, negotiable, less important than whatever Tyler wanted at that moment. "I've got to go," I said quietly. "Becca, wait." I ended the call and turned off my phone. The cherry blossoms continued their gentle descent, indifferent to human dramas. A young couple strolled by, hands intertwined, laughing at some private joke. A woman jogged past with her golden retriever. Life continued its normal rhythms while mine had just been fundamentally altered. My relationship with my family would never be the same. The trust that had been broken wasn't just financial. It was the basic belief that they had my best interests at heart, that they valued my future as much as Tyler's. The realization settled over me like the flower petals, gentle, inevitable, changing the landscape. For 24 years, I had defined myself largely through my family's lens, measured my worth by their approval. I had accepted the role of supportive daughter and self-sacrificing sister, because that's what good families did. But good families didn't commit fraud. Good families didn't sacrifice one child's future for another's speculative venture. Good families didn't lie and manipulate and gaslight. I stood, brushing petals from my skirt, and began walking toward my apartment. With each step, determination crystallized within me. I would become a doctor without their emotional support. I would build a life defined by my own values, not their warped sense of family obligation. My phone remained off as I climbed the 3 flights to my apartment. Inside, my roommate Zoe looked up from her textbook spread across our secondhand coffee table. "There you are. Your parents called the landline looking for you." She tilted her head, studying my face. "Are you okay? You look different." I'm different," I said, and for the first time that day, I smiled. "I just found out my parents tried to steal my trust fund to give to my brother." Zoe's jaw dropped. "They what? Are you serious right now?" "Completely serious." I dropped my backpack and headed to the kitchen, suddenly starving. "But the bank caught it, the money's safe, and I've just discovered what it feels like to finally see my family clearly." That's horrible," Zoe stammered, following me. "What are you going to do?" I opened the refrigerator, surveying its meager contents, remnants of last night's stir-fry, half a carton of eggs, condiments, and a bottle of cheap champagne. We'd been saving for after finals. "First," I said, reaching for the champagne, "I'm going to celebrate the fact that I'm not going to be in debt for the rest of my life." "And then?" Zoe asked, already reaching for glasses. "And then I'm going to figure out who Rebecca Harlow is when she's not bending over backward to please a family that never put her first." The cork popped with a satisfying sound that felt like freedom. "To financial independence," I said, raising my glass. "And to seeing clearly," Zoe added. We clinked glasses as my phone, still turned off, sat silently in my bag. Tomorrow I would have to decide how to proceed with my family. Whether to confront them further or simply create distance. I would need to research the legal ramifications of what they'd attempted. I would have to protect myself in ways I'd never imagined necessary. But tonight, I would celebrate the strange gift this betrayal had given me. Clarity, purpose, and a new understanding of my own worth that no one could take away. The campus library became my sanctuary in the weeks following the trust fund revelation. Between the towering shelves of medical textbooks and journals, I found both solitude and purpose. My phone continued to vibrate with family calls and texts, but I had established a new routine. Check messages once daily, respond only to factual questions, ignore emotional manipulation. "Rebecca, your father and I are devastated by your accusations," my mother's latest voicemail proclaimed. "We've always wanted what's best for the family. Please call us so we can explain." "Explain what?" I wondered, as I highlighted passages in my MCAT prep book. How they'd prioritized Tyler's brewery over my medical school dreams. How they'd attempted to appropriate money my grandfather had specifically designated for my education. I deleted the message and returned to my studies. 3 tables away, a first-year medical student was explaining cardiac pathways to her study group. I eavesdropped shamelessly, mentally testing my own knowledge. In 7 months, after graduation, I could be sitting at a table like that, no longer dreaming of becoming a doctor, but actually becoming one. My phone lit up with a text from Zoe. "Unexpected visitor at the apartment. Your brother. What do you want me to do?" My stomach tightened. I hadn't spoken to Tyler since our phone call the day of the bank meeting 2 weeks ago. "Tell him I'm not available," I texted back. "Don't tell him where I am." 3 dots appeared as Zoe typed her response. "He says he's not leaving until he talks to you. Brought beer from his brewery." Acting friendly but weird, of course he had. Tyler had always been a master at using surface charm to get what he wanted. I could picture him perfectly, lounging on our secondhand couch, making Zoe laugh with his stories, all while waiting to corner me when I returned. "I'll be home in 30. Don't let him touch my stuff." I packed my books and left the library, my mind racing. What did Tyler want? Had our parents sent him as their emissary? Or did he have his own agenda? Spring had fully arrived on campus, the quad crowded with students sprawled on blankets, tossing frisbees, or reading under trees. In another life, one where my family hadn't betrayed me, I might have joined them, might have celebrated the approaching end of my undergraduate career with carefree abandon. Instead, I walked briskly, mentally rehearsing what I would and wouldn't say to Tyler. He was sitting on our front steps when I approached, apparently having given up on charming Zoe indoors. 2 bottles of amber beer sat beside him, condensation beating on the brown glass. "There she is," he called, his smile too wide to be genuine. "The future Dr. Harlow." "What do you want, Tyler?" I asked, stopping a few feet away. He patted the step beside him. "Can a guy visit his sister without an agenda?" Not when that guy recently tried to appropriate her trust fund. The smile faltered slightly. "Look, I came to clear the air. Things got complicated, messages got mixed up. Messages like, 'We're taking your money without telling you?' Seems pretty straightforward to me." Tyler's jaw tightened, but he visibly controlled himself, forcing his expression back to easygoing. "Why don't we talk inside? I brought samples from the brewery's new summer line." "I don't want your beer, Tyler. I want an explanation for why you thought it was okay to take money that Grandpa Ellis specifically left for my education." A muscle twitched in his cheek. "Mom and Dad said it was available as family investment. Capital. They said you weren't planning to use it anytime soon. And you believed that? That I wouldn't want to use $250,000 specifically designated for my medical education? To pay for my medical education?" He shrugged. "It sounded reasonable at the time. You've always been the responsible one, getting scholarships and stuff." The dismissive way he said it, like my academic achievements were some kind of character flaw rather than the result of hard work, made something snap inside me. That's exactly the problem, Tyler. I've always been expected to be the responsible one, the one who sacrifices, the one who understands when family resources go to you instead. I crossed my arms. "Not anymore. That trust is mine, and it's staying mine." He stood suddenly, his height advantage allowing him to look down at me. "Do you have any idea what this is doing to Mom? She's barely sleeping. Dad's stress levels are through the roof." "Don't you dare try to guilt me," I said, stepping back to maintain eye contact without craning my neck. "They committed fraud, Tyler. They tried to steal my future. If they're stressed, it's because they got caught, not because I'm being unreasonable." "It's just money, Becca. Why are you being so dramatic about it?" "If it's just money, why were you so desperate to take mine? Why not get a small business loan like a normal entrepreneur?" He looked away. "The banks wouldn't approve the loan. Something about my credit history and previous business ventures." "So you decided my trust fund was your personal backup plan, without even asking me?" "I was going to pay you back. Once the brewery started turning a profit." "With what interest? Rate? On what timeline? With what collateral?" I challenged. "Or was it going to be like that $5,000 you borrowed for your food truck? Or the $3,000 for your cryptocurrency investment? I'm still waiting for those repayments." Tyler's face flushed red. "This is different. The brewery is a legitimate business with actual customers and products. We just need capital to expand. Then find investors who believe in your business. My trust fund is not your safety net." He raked a hand through his hair in frustration. "God, you've always been like this. So rigid, so unforgiving. Family is supposed to help each other." "Help? Yes. Steal from? No. I didn't steal anything. Mom and Dad were handling it. By committing fraud." We stood in tense silence, the spring breeze rustling the newly leafed trees along our street. A neighbor walked by with her dog, giving us a curious glance before quickly looking away from our obvious confrontation. Tyler's shoulders finally slumped. Look, the brewery is in trouble, Becca. Without capital investment, we'll have to close by the end of summer. 18 people will lose their jobs. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I meant it. But that doesn't make it my responsibility to fix. What happened to you? He asked, his voice softer now. You used to care about helping others. I still do. That's why I'm going to be a doctor. But I've learned that I can't set myself on fire to keep everyone else warm. I picked up my backpack from where I'd set it on the sidewalk. I have to go. I have an MCAT study session in an hour. So that's it? You're just going to let the brewery fail? Let Mom and Dad keep suffering? Their suffering is self-inflicted, Tyler. And the brewery's success or failure is on you, not me. I started up the steps. I wish you luck, I really do, but not at the expense of my future. His hand caught my arm. They're talking about remortgaging the house. They're in their 60s, Becca. They should be thinking about retirement, not taking on more debt. A cold feeling washed over me. Are you serious? Dead serious. Dad's meeting with the bank next week. I pulled away from his grip. That's a terrible idea, and you know it. Tell them no. Tyler laughed bitterly. You think they listen to me? They see me as their last chance at having a child they can be proud of. Someone who builds something tangible instead of burying themselves in books. The comment stung more than I wanted to admit. That's their problem, not mine, and certainly not a reason for them to risk their retirement. Just talk to them, Becca. One conversation, that's all I'm asking. I studied my brother's face, the familiar features that had always been able to charm our parents into giving him whatever he wanted. For the first time, I noticed the worry, lines around his eyes, the slight graying at his temples. At 31, Tyler was starting to show the strain of his perpetual quest for easy success. I'll think about it, I finally said, unlocking the front door. But I'm not promising anything. That's all I'm asking. Relief flooded his expression. Thank you. I paused in the doorway. Don't thank me yet. If I do talk to them, it won't be to offer money. It will be to tell them they're making another mistake by enabling you. The door closed on Tyler's crestfallen face. Inside, Zoe emerged from her bedroom, eyebrows raised in silent question. He wants me to convince our parents not to remortgage their house to save his failing brewery, I explained, dropping my backpack on the counter. Wow. Zoe leaned against the wall. What are you going to do? I don't know. I sank onto the couch. Part of me thinks they deserve whatever financial mess they create. But another part still cares about them, Zoe finished gently. Unfortunately. I stared at the ceiling. Why is it so hard to stop caring about people who clearly don't prioritize your well-being? Because you're a good person, Beck. Better than they deserve, honestly. My phone buzzed with a text. Not my family this time, but Dr. Preston, my academic advisor. Just heard back from Boston University. They want to interview you next week. Call me to discuss preparation. I showed Zoe the message, momentarily distracted from family drama. Oh my God, she squealed, pulling me into a hug. This is huge! BuMed is your top choice! I know. I felt a genuine smile break through for the first time that day. I can't believe they want to interview me already. We're celebrating tonight, Zoe declared. No arguments. We'll get takeout from that Thai place you love. Open that bottle of wine Jenna left after the Christmas party, and you can forget about Tyler and his brewery for at least one evening. The mention of the brewery brought reality crashing back. Even this moment, this achievement I'd worked so hard for, was tainted by family complications. I need to figure out what to do about my parents first, I said. If they remortgage their house and the brewery fails anyway, they could lose everything. Zoe's expression softened. You know, you could just tell them about the interview. Remind them that this is exactly what your grandfather wanted for you, what that trust fund was intended for. Maybe seeing your dream actually materializing will make them reconsider, or they'll just find a way to make it about Tyler again. I sighed. But you're right. I should at least try to talk some sense into them. 2 days later, I sat in a coffee shop exactly halfway between my apartment and my parents' hotel. They had traveled to Boston specifically for this meeting, a fact they'd emphasized repeatedly in their messages, as if their willingness to drive 3 hours somehow negated their attempted fraud. I'd chosen a public location deliberately. No privacy for dramatic scenes or manipulative tears. Just neutral ground with plenty of witnesses and an easy escape route. They arrived precisely on time, my mother scanning the crowded cafe with disapproval before spotting me in the corner booth. She looked older somehow, the careful makeup not quite concealing the stress lines around her eyes. My father followed, his once commanding presence diminished, shoulders slightly stooped. "Rebecca," my mother said, sliding into the booth opposite me. "Thank you for agreeing to meet us." My father sat beside her, nodding stiffly. "You're looking well." "Thank you for coming," I replied neutrally, hands wrapped around my coffee mug. "I understand you wanted to discuss your financial situation?" My mother flinched at the businesslike tone. "We wanted to discuss our family situation. The finances are just one aspect." "The aspect where you tried to take my trust fund? Or the aspect where you're now considering remortgaging your house to fund Tyler's failing business?" My father's jaw tightened. "We made a mistake with the trust. We acknowledge that. But Tyler needs our support right now." "And I don't?" I met his gaze steadily. "I got an interview at Boston University School of Medicine. It's happening next week." The news hung between us for a moment. That's wonderful, dear," my mother finally said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "We always knew you were smart enough." "Boston's an expensive city," my father added, his businessman's mind immediately calculating costs. "The living expenses alone would be covered by my trust fund," I interrupted. "The one Grandpa Ellis specifically established for my medical education. The one you tried to empty for Tyler's brewery." My mother reached for my hand across the table. I let her take it, though I didn't return the squeeze she gave me. "Rebecca, we're proud of your accomplishments. We've always been proud. But family means supporting each other through difficult times. Your brother's business affects the livelihoods of many people. So does my becoming a doctor," I countered. "How many lives could I save or improve over a career in medicine?" "Grandpa understood that when he established the trust." My father leaned forward. "No one is saying you shouldn't become a doctor. We're just asking for flexibility with timing. Perhaps a gap year while we sort out the family finances." The audacity of the suggestion left me momentarily speechless. They were still trying to redirect my future to accommodate Tyler's poor choices. "Let me be absolutely clear," I said when I found my voice again. "I will not delay medical school. I will not contribute my trust fund to the brewery. And I strongly advise you not to remortgage your house for a business that has already shown signs of failure." "You don't understand business," my father said dismissively. "Every venture has growing pains. Tyler just needs time and capital." "What?" "I understand his patterns," I replied. "Tyler has started and failed at 4 different businesses in the last decade. Each time you've bailed him out financially. Each time you've made excuses. And each time, nothing changes except that your retirement fund gets smaller." My mother withdrew her hand from mine, her expression hardening. "We won't abandon your brother when he needs us." "I'm not asking you to abandon him. I'm asking you to help him in ways that don't involve throwing good money after bad. Help him develop an actual business plan. Help him learn from his past failures. Help him become self-sufficient for once in his life." "You've become so cold," my mother murmured, genuinely bewildered. "This isn't how we raised you." "No," I agreed. You raised me to be the responsible one who never asked for help, who understood when family resources went to Tyler instead, who was supposed to smile and accept that my needs would always come second. I took a steadying breath. I'm breaking that pattern, for all our sakes. My father checked his watch, a nervous habit he'd had for as long as I could remember. We should go. We're meeting Tyler for dinner to discuss next steps. Of course they were. Think about what we've said, Rebecca, my mother urged as they prepared to leave. Family should stand together. I remained seated as they gathered their things. I have one last thing to say. If you remortgage your house and Tyler's brewery fails anyway, don't come to me for financial help. I won't enable this cycle anymore. My father's face flushed with anger. We've never asked you for money. You tried to take my trust fund without asking, I reminded him, and I suspect it won't be the last attempt if I don't establish this boundary now. They left without further argument, my mother's perfume lingering in the air behind them. Through the cafe window, I watched them walk to their car, my father's, hand on my mother's back in a gesture of solidarity I recognized from childhood. The two of them, united, often against me. I signaled the barista for another coffee. The meeting had gone exactly as expected, yet I felt strangely empty. Not sad or angry, just detached. As if I'd finally accepted that I couldn't change them, couldn't make them see the damage they were doing to themselves, to Tyler, and to our family's future. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. How did it go? I typed back. Exactly as expected. They're still choosing Tyler. But for the first time, I'm okay with that. And I was. The constant ache of trying to earn equal standing in my family had begun to fade, replaced by something unfamiliar but welcome. Peace with my own choices, regardless of their approval. I opened my MCAT study app and began reviewing cardiology terms. In 1 week, I would sit across from the admissions committee at Boston University and take another step toward the future my grandfather had believed in, the future I deserved, with or without my family's support. The Boston University School of Medicine gleamed in the morning sunlight, its red brick facade both intimidating and inviting. I stood on the sidewalk, my navy interview suit perfectly pressed, portfolio clutched perhaps too tightly in my hands. Inside that building, a committee of physicians and academics would evaluate whether I was worthy of joining their ranks, of beginning the journey toward becoming the doctor I'd dreamed of being since I was 12 years old. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Another text from my mother. Praying for your interview today. Remember to smile and be yourself. The message was so normal, so motherly, that for a moment I could almost forget everything that had happened. Almost. I tucked the phone away without responding and climbed the stairs to the entrance. The weight of the past few weeks, the betrayal, the confrontations, the boundaries I'd established, seemed to lighten with each step. Here, I wasn't defined by my family dynamics. Here, I was simply Rebecca Harlow, biology major with a 3.92 GPA and strong MCAT scores, applying to become a physician. The interview went better than I'd dared hope. The panel of 5, 3 physicians, a bioethicist, and a current fourth-year student, seemed genuinely interested in my research on autoimmune disorders and my volunteer work at the campus health clinic. When they asked why I wanted to become a doctor, the passion in my voice wasn't manufactured or rehearsed. It was the culmination of a lifetime of certainty about my path. Ms. Harlow, the department chair said as the interview concluded, your academic credentials are impressive, but what stands out most is your clarity of purpose. Many applicants can tell us they want to help people. Few can articulate the specific ways they intend to do so with such precision. I floated out of the building 2 hours later, the spring sunshine now feeling like a spotlight on a promising future. Whatever happened with my family, whatever choices my parents made about Tyler's brewery, I had just taken a concrete step toward my own future. Outside the medical school, I checked my phone, half expecting more messages from my parents. Instead, I found a text from an unexpected source. Mr. Delaney, the trust officer. Ms. Harlow, please call my office at your earliest convenience regarding some paperwork that requires your attention. My stomach tightened. Had my parents made another attempt to access the funds? I found a quiet bench and dialed the bank immediately. Ms. Harlow, thank you for returning my call so promptly, Mr. Delaney said when his assistant connected us. I wanted to inform you that we've completed the security updates to your trust account as requested. However, in reviewing the historical documentation, we discovered something you should be aware of. I braced myself. What is it? It appears that approximately 8 years ago, when you were 17, your parents made a withdrawal of $50,000 from the trust. Unlike the recent attempt, this transaction was technically within their rights as administrators, as the trust terms allowed for educational expenses prior to your 25th birthday. My mind raced backward. 8 years ago, I had been a high school junior. The only significant educational expense had been a $2,000 summer program at Cornell, which my parents had made me work part-time to help pay for. What was the stated purpose of the withdrawal? I asked, already suspecting the answer. The paperwork indicates it was for collegiate preparatory experiences. Rather vague language, I'm afraid. But the check was made out to Tyler Harlow Educational Trust. My brother had started college that year, a private university with a hefty tuition bill, so they took money from my trust to pay for Tyler's college expenses, I said flatly. It would appear so, Mr. Delaney confirmed, his professional tone not quite masking his disapproval. While technically permissible under the trust's terms for educational expenses, the intent seems questionable. Is there any way to recover those funds? I'm afraid not. The withdrawal was properly documented and too much time has elapsed. However, I wanted you to have all the information about your trust's history as you make future financial decisions. After thanking him and ending the call, I remained on the bench, letting this new information settle. They had been diverting my resources to Tyler for even longer than I'd realized. The pattern wasn't new. It was deeply established. The vibration of my phone interrupted my thoughts. Tyler's name flashed on the screen. I almost ignored it, but then decided that hiding from reality wasn't my style anymore. Hello, Tyler. They're doing it, he said without preamble, his voice tight with what sounded like panic. They signed the paperwork yesterday. The house is leveraged to the hilt. I closed my eyes briefly. I told them not to do that. Well, they didn't listen. His frustration burst through the phone. Dad's convinced this distribution deal is going to save everything, but our production equipment is literally held together, with duct tape and prayers at this point. We can't scale up quality without major investments in infrastructure. Why are you telling me this? I asked wearily. A pause. Because you're the smart one, Becca. You always have been. And I need someone smart right now to help me figure out how to not destroy our parents' retirement. The irony was almost too much. After years of dismissing my academic focus, after attempting to appropriate my trust fund without a second thought, my brother was now turning to me for the intelligence he'd previously mocked? So now you want my help? After everything that's happened? I know it's rich, believe me. His voice softened. I've been thinking about what you said, about patterns and enabling and all that. You're not wrong. My grip on the phone tightened. I appreciate that, but recognition doesn't solve the immediate problem. No, but maybe you could look at the business projections? Tell me if I'm missing something? Dad's too emotionally invested to see clearly, and Mom just goes along with whatever he thinks is best. The request was so unexpected, so uncharacteristically humble coming from Tyler, that I found myself considering it. Send me the files, I said finally. I'm not promising anything, but I'll look them over. The relief in his voice was palpable. Thank you. I'll email everything tonight. After we hung up, I sat for a moment longer, processing this strange reversal. For the first time in our adult lives, Tyler was acknowledging my expertise rather than competing with or dismissing it. Too bad it had taken a potential financial catastrophe to get us here. That evening, Zoe found me at our kitchen table, surrounded by printouts of Tyler's business plans, financial projections, and distribution proposals. My laptop was open to a spreadsheet where I was recalculating various scenarios. "So," she said, dropping her backpack on a chair, "this is what reconciliation looks like? Drowning in brewery paperwork?" "Not reconciliation," I corrected, rubbing my tired eyes. "Just damage control." Zoe peered over my shoulder at the spreadsheets. "How bad is it?" "Objectively, the brewery actually has potential. They have good products and a decent local following. But their business model is fundamentally flawed. Their production capabilities are inadequate for the distribution deal they're pursuing, and their financial projections are wildly optimistic." "Sounds like Tyler," Zoe remarked. "The thing is," I continued, tapping my pen against a particular column of figures, "with proper restructuring and realistic expectations, they could be sustainable. Not the overnight sensation Tyler's been dreaming of, but a viable small business." "So, what are you going to do?" I leaned back in my chair, considering. "I'm going to tell them the truth. Show them exactly what needs to change for this to work. Whether they listen is up to them." The next day, I requested a video call with Tyler and my parents. They appeared on my laptop screen from the living room of my childhood home, my mother perched anxiously on the edge of the sofa, my father in his usual armchair, Tyler pacing in the background. "Thank you for reviewing everything," my father began, his CEO voice firmly in place. "I'm sure you can see the tremendous potential of this distribution opportunity." "Actually," I replied, "I see significant problems with your current approach." For the next 45 minutes, I methodically walked them through my analysis. The unrealistic production expectations, the quality control issues, the cash flow problems that would only worsen with expansion. I had prepared graphs, comparative analyses, and 3 distinct restructuring scenarios. My father's face grew increasingly rigid as I spoke. My mother kept glancing worriedly between him and the screen. But it was Tyler's reaction that surprised me most. He was taking notes, nodding occasionally, his expression thoughtful rather than defensive. "So basically, you're saying we're doomed," my father concluded when I finished my presentation. "Not at all," I corrected. "I'm saying your current plan is doomed. There's a difference." I clicked to my final slide, a streamlined business model focused on quality over quantity, specialized niche products rather than mass distribution, and gradual growth based on proven success metrics. This approach plays to the brewery's actual strengths rather than Tyler's fantasy version. It won't make anyone rich overnight, but it could build a stable, profitable business over time. I met Tyler's eyes through the screen. It would require patience and realistic expectations, 2 things this family hasn't historically prioritized. A heavy silence followed. My father opened his mouth, clearly ready to dismiss my analysis, but Tyler spoke first. "She's right." He moved closer to the camera. "Everything Becca's saying matches what our master brewer has been telling me for months. We've been trying to grow too fast without the infrastructure to support it." My father's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Tyler, this distribution deal is our ticket to the next level. We can't just abandon it because of some theoretical concerns." "They're not theoretical, Dad," Tyler insisted. "We had 3 batch failures last month alone because our equipment couldn't maintain consistent temperatures. We're cutting corners on ingredients to keep costs down. That's not sustainable." Another silence, this one charged with shifting power. Dynamics. My mother reached for my father's hand, her expression worried. "Richard," she said softly, "maybe we should listen. Rebecca has always been good with details and analysis. and Tyler is the one running the day-to-day operations. My father's jaw worked silently for a moment. Then he sighed, suddenly looking every one of his 64 years. So, what exactly are you proposing? Call off the distribution deal, I said. It's too much too soon. Focus instead on perfecting your core products and building a loyal local customer base. Invest in quality rather than quantity. And the house? My mother asked. We've already signed the mortgage papers. Use the absolute minimum necessary to upgrade essential equipment only, I advised. Put the rest in secure investments as a safety net. And establish clear financial boundaries between your personal finances and the business. The conversation continued for another hour, drilling down into specifics. With each minute, I could see my father's resistance weakening, Tyler's understanding growing, and my mother's anxiety lessening. By the end, we had a tentative plan that, while not perfect, at least reduced the risk of complete financial catastrophe. I still think we're missing an opportunity with this distribution deal, my father said as we prepared to end the call. But your analysis is compelling. From him, this was tantamount to full agreement. Thank you for doing this, Tyler added. I know you had every reason to tell us all to go jump in a lake. I surprised myself with a small smile. Well, Grandpa, Alice always said a Harlow never walks away from a problem they can solve. My mother's eyes misted at the mention of her father. He would be proud of you, Rebecca, not just for your academic achievements, but for how you've handled all of this. The compliment was unexpected, and I wasn't entirely sure how to respond. Part of me wanted to accept it graciously. Another part wanted to ask where this recognition had been throughout my childhood. I should go, I said instead. I have another MCAT practice test scheduled tonight. Before you go, my father interjected, his tone suddenly businesslike again. Your mother and I have been discussing your concerns about the trust fund situation. We want you to know that we're prepared to make amends. My guard instantly rose. What does that mean? It means, my mother explained, that we recognize we made a serious error in judgment, both with the recent attempt and with the college funds withdrawal years ago. Mr. Delaney told you about that discovery, I guessed. My father nodded stiffly. He was quite clear about the ethical implications, even if the transaction was technically permissible. We'd like to replace that $50,000, my mother continued. Not to your trust. We understand you want us to have no access there, but directly to you for any expenses related to medical school. The offer caught me off guard. It represented an acknowledgement of wrongdoing I hadn't expected from them. I appreciate the gesture, I said carefully, but I need to think about it. My father frowned. What's there to think about? We're trying to make things right. And I'm trying to ensure we establish healthy boundaries going forward, I countered. Money has always been complicated in our family, used as a tool for control or to show preference. Before I accept anything, I need to be sure we're changing those patterns. My mother looked wounded, but Tyler nodded in understanding. That makes sense, he said. Take whatever time you need. After the call ended, I sat in the quiet of my apartment, turning over this new development. Their offer felt like a step toward accountability, however small. But accepting money from them again, even as restitution, seemed fraught with potential complications. My phone buzzed with a text notification. Not my family this time, but Boston University Medical School. Congratulations. Rebecca Harlow. We are pleased to offer you admission to the Boston University School of Medicine for the incoming class. I read the rest through a blur of tears. Accepted. I had been accepted. In that moment, sitting alone in my apartment with life-changing news illuminating my phone screen, I made a decision about my family's offer. I would accept the replacement funds, but with clear written terms. The money would go directly into a separate account used only for medical school expenses. My parents would have no input on how or when it was spent, and the transaction would Be accompanied by a family agreement acknowledging that financial support came with no strings attached. They might agree or they might not. Either way, I would be attending medical school in the fall, the future my grandfather had envisioned for me, the dream I had worked toward for so long. I walked to the window and looked out at the campus quad below, where students crossed paths, unaware that my life had just definitively shifted course. The trust fund saga had taught me painful but necessary lessons about family, boundaries, and self-worth. It had forced me to see my parents and brother clearly, without the filter of obligatory affection. And most importantly, it had shown me my own resilience. Whatever happened next, whether my family truly changed or simply found new ways to disappoint me, I knew one thing with certainty. I would be all right. Better than all right. I would be Dr. Rebecca Harlow someday, healing patients and building a life defined by my choices, not my family's limitations. I picked up my phone to share the news with Zoe first. My family could wait. This moment of triumph belonged to me and to those who had supported me unconditionally. The future I had feared might be stolen was now securely mine, and nothing, not family dysfunction, not attempted fraud, not years of being undervalued, could take it away. The summer before medical school passed in a whirlwind of preparation. I found a small but functional studio apartment within walking distance of the medical campus, completed required immunizations, and worked extra shifts at the campus coffee shop to build up savings for incidentals my trust fund wouldn't cover. My relationship with my family settled into something cautiously civil. Weekly phone calls with my mother, occasional text exchanges with Tyler about the brewery's restructuring, and formal emails with my father regarding the financial restitution. They had promised. True to their word, my parents transferred $50,000 to a dedicated account for my medical school expenses, with the legal documentation I had insisted upon. The process had been awkward but necessary, with my father bristling at what he called my excessive legalities and my mother tearfully asking why I couldn't just trust their word. Only Tyler had defended my approach, reminding them that they had broken trust in fundamental ways and needed to accept the consequences. "You look distracted," Zoe commented one evening as we packed the last of my belongings into labeled boxes. After 4 years as roommates, we were finally separating. Me to my medical school studio, her to a PhD program in Chicago. "Just thinking about how much has changed since April," I admitted, sealing a box of textbooks. 4 months ago, I thought I'd have to take out massive loans for medical school. I was furious with my family, terrified about my financial future, and convinced I'd never be able to trust them again. "And now?" Zoe prompted, expertly wrapping a framed photo of us from sophomore year. "Now?" I considered the question. Now I'm cautiously optimistic. My finances are secure. The brewery is actually showing signs of stability with the new business model. And my family is trying, in their imperfect way. Zoe nodded thoughtfully. "You know what impresses me most? You never got bitter. Angry, yes. Protective of what's yours, absolutely. But you didn't let their actions poison you." I hadn't thought of it that way, but she was right. Despite everything, I hadn't allowed resentment to define me or my future. Relationships. I had set boundaries, demanded accountability, and moved forward, but without the hardening of heart that so often accompanies betrayal. "I guess I realized bitterness would only hurt me in the long run," I said, reaching for the packing tape. "And I've had enough setbacks without creating new ones for myself." The night before medical school orientation, I received an unexpected call from Mr. Delaney. "Ms. Harlow, I hope I'm not disturbing you," he began, his professional tone softened slightly by what sounded like genuine concern. "I wanted to personally congratulate you on your admission to medical school. Your grandfather would be extremely proud." "Thank you," I replied, touched by the gesture. "That means a lot. I also wanted to inform you of a development regarding your trust. As you know, the full balance becomes available to you tomorrow on your 25th birthday." "Yes, I've completed the necessary paperwork. Indeed. However, there's something you may not be aware of. Your grandfather included a letter to be delivered to you along with the funds. It's been in our secure storage all these years. My heart quickened. A letter? You never mentioned that before. The trust instructions were quite specific about timing, Mr. Delaney explained. The letter was to be delivered only upon the release of funds at age 25, regardless of any other circumstances. Do you know what it says? I asked, both excited and nervous about this connection to the grandfather I had lost when I was 16. No, Ms. Harlow. The envelope has remained sealed since your grandfather entrusted it to us. Would you like us to courier it to your new address, or would you prefer to collect it in person? In person, I said without hesitation. I'll come tomorrow after orientation. That night I barely slept, wondering what wisdom or insights Grandpa Ellis might have left for me. He had always been my champion, the one family member who seemed to truly see me. What final message had he considered important enough to preserve for nearly a decade after his death? Medical school orientation was everything I had dreamed of, intellectually stimulating, slightly overwhelming, and filled with like-minded peers who shared my passion for medicine. I met my faculty advisor, learned about first-year curriculum, and received my white coat for the ceremony scheduled the following week. Throughout it all, however, my mind kept drifting to the mysterious letter waiting at the bank. At precisely 3:30 p.m., I entered Mr. Delaney's office, trying to contain my anticipation. Ms. Harlow, he greeted me, rising from behind his immaculate desk. Happy birthday. Please have a seat while I retrieve your grandfather's letter. He disappeared into a back room, returning moments later with a cream-colored envelope, slightly yellowed with age. My name was written on the front in my grandfather's distinctive handwriting, bold blue ink with flourishes on the capital letters, just as I remembered. Would you like privacy? Mr. Delaney offered. I nodded gratefully, and he discreetly exited, closing the door behind him. For several moments, I simply held the envelope, tracing my name with my fingertip. Then, carefully, I broke the seal and removed several pages of heavyweight stationery. My dearest Rebecca, if you're reading this, you've reached your 25th birthday and are now in full possession of the trust I've established for you. More importantly, you've likely followed the path toward becoming a physician that you spoke of so passionately during our chess games when you were just 12 years old. I have always been struck by your clarity of purpose, your compassion, and your determination, qualities that will serve you well in medicine. While others in our family are easily distracted by immediate gratification or get-rich-quick schemes, and yes, I'm thinking of your brother as I write this, you have always demonstrated the patience and diligence required for meaningful achievement. Established this trust specifically to support your medical education, because I believe the world needs more doctors like the one you will become, thoughtful, thorough, and genuinely concerned with healing rather than status or wealth. My own life was saved by such a physician when I was a young man, and creating this opportunity for you feels like repaying that debt. I must add something difficult but necessary. I have observed concerning patterns in how your parents manage family resources and attention. There has always been an imbalance in how they support you versus your brother. While I have spoken to them about this many times, old habits are resistant to change. It would not surprise me if they have attempted to redirect these funds toward Tyler's endeavors, despite my explicit instructions. If that has occurred, I hope you have found the strength to stand firm. The money itself matters less than what it represents, an investment in your potential and a recognition of your value. Never allow anyone, family included, to diminish your worth or divert you from your purpose. Remember always that true family supports each member's highest good, not just the loudest voice or the most immediate need. If you have had to fight for what is rightfully yours, know that doing so honors rather than betrays family loyalty. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do for those we care about is to refuse to enable self-destructive patterns. You have been blessed with a brilliant mind, a compassionate heart, and unshakable determination. These gifts will carry you far beyond anything money could provide. The trust fund is merely a tool to help you on your way. Your character is what will ultimately determine your success and happiness. I regret that I cannot be there to see you receive your medical degree or treat your first patient, but know that wherever I am immensely proud of the woman and physician you have become. With all my love and confidence, your grandfather, Ellis Montgomery P.S. The trust includes a small additional sum that doesn't appear in the official balance, a graduation gift of sorts to be used however you wish once you've completed medical school. Mr. Delaney has the details. Tears blurred my vision as I finished reading. Somehow, years ago, my grandfather had anticipated exactly what would happen with the trust. He had known me well enough to predict both the challenge I would face and the strength I would need to overcome it. More startling was the realization that he had recognized the unhealthy family dynamics I had only recently begun to see clearly, myself. All those years, while I had thought no one noticed the preferential treatment Tyler received, my grandfather had been quietly observing, understanding, and preparing to help me navigate it. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Mr. Delaney peered in cautiously. "I apologize for the intrusion, Ms. Harlow. I just wanted to ensure you had everything you needed." I wiped my eyes quickly. "Yes, thank you. The letter was illuminating." He nodded understandingly. "Your grandfather was a remarkably perceptive man. He cared deeply about your future." "The letter mentions an additional sum?" I asked, remembering the postscript. "Ah, yes." Mr. Delaney returned to his desk and opened a drawer. "There is a supplemental trust account containing approximately $75,000 to be released upon your medical school graduation. Your grandfather called it his launching pad for your career, intended to help with residency transitions, relocation, costs, or perhaps initial practice setup depending on your specialty. The thoughtfulness of this provision, this final gift carefully planned and sequestered years in advance, brought fresh tears to my eyes. While my parents had been willing to divert my educational funds to Tyler's brewery, my grandfather had been establishing additional resources specifically for my career transition. "Thank you for keeping this safe all these years," I said, carefully folding the letter and returning it to its envelope. "It was my privilege," Mr. Delaney replied sincerely. "Your grandfather spoke of you often and with great pride. He would be pleased to see his foresight vindicated." That evening, sitting cross-legged on the bare mattress in my new apartment, surrounded by unpacked boxes and the fresh possibilities of medical school, I reread my grandfather's letter twice more. Each reading revealed new layers of his wisdom and care. Should I share the letter with my parents? Part of me wanted them to see that Grandpa Ellis had recognized the family's unhealthy patterns years ago. Another part wondered if doing so would only create new tensions when we were just beginning to rebuild fragile connections. My phone rang, the screen showing Mom, our weekly call. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," she said when I answered. "How was orientation?" "Amazing," I replied truthfully. "Everything I hoped it would be." "That's wonderful. Your father and I were just talking about how proud we are. We've set up a little birthday surprise for you. Check your new apartment mailbox tomorrow." "Thanks, Mom. That's thoughtful." I paused, then decided to take a chance on honesty. "I received another surprise today. A letter from Grandpa Ellis that he arranged to have delivered on my 25th birthday." Silence stretched for several seconds. "I didn't know Dad left you a letter," she finally said, her voice carefully neutral. "It was with the trust documentation. He seemed to anticipate that there might be complications with the fund." Another lengthy pause. "What exactly did he say?" Her tone had acquired a defensive edge. I sighed internally. Some patterns were deeply ingrained. He said he was proud of me and confident in my future as a doctor. He talked about why he established the trust and what he hoped it would help me accomplish. I deliberately omitted the parts about the family dynamics, deciding that confrontation wouldn't serve any useful purpose tonight. I see. My mother's voice softened slightly. That sounds like Dad. He always had a special bond with you. He did, I agreed. And I'm grateful for it every day. The conversation shifted to safer topics. My new apartment, the white coat ceremony, Tyler's latest brewery updates. By the time we hung up, the tension had dissipated, replaced by the cautious civility that now characterized our relationship. As I prepared for bed that night, I placed my grandfather's letter in the small fireproof safe I'd purchased for important documents. Its message would remain private, a personal connection to the man who had believed in me so completely and prepared so carefully for my future. 3 days later, a small package arrived from my parents. Inside was a vintage stethoscope, not a modern clinical instrument, but an antique from the early 1900s, beautifully restored and mounted in a display case. The accompanying card read, "This belonged to your great-grandfather, Dr. James Montgomery, your grandfather's father." Ellis kept it all these years, and we found it when cleaning out his study after he passed. We think he would want you to have it now, as you begin your medical journey. With love and pride, Mom and Dad, I ran my fingers over the tarnished metal and aged rubber tubing, feeling a connection to a medical heritage I hadn't known existed. My great-grandfather had been a doctor. Perhaps my path had deeper roots than I'd realized. Later that day, I called my parents to thank them for the meaningful gift. "We should have given it to you sooner," my father admitted, "when you first started talking about becoming a doctor. But we always thought that Tyler needed the encouragement more," I finished when he trailed off. "Yes," he acknowledged with surprising candor. "We made many mistakes in how we balanced attention between you two. Your determination made it too easy to focus on Tyler's struggles instead." It was the most direct acknowledgement I'd ever received of the imbalance that had shaped my childhood. "I appreciate you saying that," I said carefully. "And I love the stethoscope. It's going to have a special place in my apartment." "Rebecca," my mother interjected, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant, "we found something else in your grandfather's study. Letters he wrote to us over the years, expressing concerns about how we were prioritizing family resources." My breath caught. "You did?" "Yes. We didn't open them until recently. They were in a folder marked Family Legacy Matters." He was quite direct about his observations. She paused. "The letter you received from him, it mentioned these concerns, didn't it?" I considered lying to spare their feelings, but decided truth was the surer foundation for our healing relationship. "Yes," I confirmed. He noted patterns he'd observed and seemed to anticipate potential issues with the trust. My father sighed, heavily. "Your grandfather was a wise man, wiser than we gave him credit for. We should have listened to him years ago." "We're listening now," my mother added quietly. "It's late, but we're trying to understand what he saw so clearly." The conversation that followed was the most honest we'd ever had about our family dynamics. The persistent favoritism toward Tyler, their misguided belief that I needed less support because of my natural capabilities, the enabling patterns that had ultimately served none of us well. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. Years of entrenched behaviors and perspectives couldn't be completely transformed in a single phone call. But it was a beginning, a tentative step toward the healthier family relationships my grandfather had hoped for us all. As my first semester of medical school began in earnest, I found myself unexpectedly grateful for the trust fund crisis. Without it, the dysfunctional patterns might have continued indefinitely, with everyone playing their assigned roles without question or growth. The attempted fraud had forced uncomfortable truths into the open, creating painful but necessary opportunities for change. My trust fund was now secure, its purpose honored. My brother's business was finding sustainable footing through realistic expectations rather than grandiose dreams. My parents were slowly, awkwardly learning to see me as an individual with valid needs, rather than simply the responsible one, who required less attention. And I was becoming Dr. Rebecca Harlow, not just through academic achievement, but through the harder lessons of establishing boundaries, demanding respect, and recognizing my own worth even when others failed to do so. One evening, during a rare quiet moment between endless anatomy lectures and lab reports, I took out my grandfather's letter again. The paper had already acquired the soft texture of frequent handling, its message no less powerful for having been read many times. "You were right, Grandpa," I whispered to the empty apartment. "About everything." Outside my window, the lights of Boston University School of Medicine glowed against the darkening sky. A beacon of the future he had helped secure for me, not just through financial provision, but through the greater gift of his unwavering belief in my potential and worth. The trust fund that had almost been stolen had ultimately given me something far more valuable than money: the clarity to see my family honestly, the courage to stand firm in my own value, and the wisdom to build a future defined by purpose rather than patterns of the past. 4 years passed in a blur of late-night study sessions, clinical rotations, and the gradual transformation from medical student to physician. My pristine white coat gradually acquired the soft, worn comfort of daily use, its pockets perpetually filled with reference cards, protein bars, and the tiny notebook where I recorded observations and questions. The relationship with my family evolved in fits and starts during those years, progress followed by setbacks, new insights undermined by old habits. My mother called faithfully each Sunday evening, genuinely interested in my classes and clinical experiences. My father sent articles about medical innovations, his way of connecting with my world. Tyler and I developed a cautious friendship, based on mutual respect rather than obligatory siblinghood. The brewery had stabilized under the restructured business model. Never the overnight sensation Tyler had initially envisioned, it had instead become a modest but reliable local establishment, with loyal customers and sustainable practices. He had finally found satisfaction in building something real, rather than chasing grandiose dreams. "You should stop by when you're home for graduation," he said during one of our monthly phone calls. "We're releasing a new beer next month." I named it Doctor's Orders. I laughed, recognizing the peace offering in his gesture. "Seriously?" "Completely serious. It's a Belgian-style white ale with hints of orange and coriander. The label has a stethoscope on it. That's actually really sweet, Tyler." "Well," he said, his voice uncharacteristically humble, "I wouldn't have a brewery at all if you hadn't stepped in with that analysis. Might as well acknowledge it properly. It wasn't a direct apology for the trust fund situation, but it was something perhaps more valuable: recognition of my contribution, appreciation for my expertise. My final year of medical school culminated in Match Day, the nerve-wracking ritual where medical students across the country simultaneously learn where they'll spend their residency years. I had applied to 20 programs, focusing on general surgery residencies at teaching hospitals with strong research components. The ceremony was held in the main auditorium, hundreds of soon-to-be doctors vibrating with anticipation as we clutched sealed envelopes containing our futures. My parents and Tyler sat in the audience, having driven from Connecticut that morning to share this milestone. "Rebecca Ann Harlow," the dean called. I walked to the podium on shaky legs, accepted my envelope, and returned to my seat without opening it. "Aren't you going to look?" whispered my classmate Priya. "Not yet," I replied. "I need a moment." The envelope felt impossibly heavy in my hands. Inside was the answer to where I'd spend the next 5 to 7 years of my life, crucial training that would shape the surgeon I would become. I'd ranked Massachusetts General Hospital as my top choice, hoping to stay in Boston where I'd built a life and support system. When the last name was called and all envelopes distributed, I finally slid my finger under the seal and pulled out the single sheet of paper. Massachusetts General Hospital, General Surgery. Relief and joy flooded through me as I looked up and caught my mother's eye across the auditorium. I gave her a thumbs up, and she pressed her hands to her mouth, tears already streaming down her face. My father nodded approvingly, his expression the closest to genuine pride I'd ever seen directed at me. Later, at a celebratory dinner at my favorite Italian restaurant, my family presented me with a small, elegantly wrapped package. "What's this?" I asked, surprised. "You already gave me the monogrammed lab coats." "This is different," my mother said, excitement making her voice rise slightly. "Something special." Inside the box was a delicate gold necklace with a small pendant. An antique key. "It's beautiful," I said, lifting it carefully from its velvet nest. "But I don't understand the significance." My father cleared his throat. "It's the key to our lake house in New Hampshire." I blinked in confusion. "You're giving me the lake house?" "Not exactly," my mother explained. "We're keeping it in the family, but we've transferred ownership to a family trust, equally divided between you and Tyler." Tyler nodded, looking unusually solemn. "No more unequal distribution of family resources. From now on, what belongs to the family belongs to both of us equally." The symbolism wasn't lost on me. After years of imbalance, of Tyler receiving the lion's share of attention, support, and financial resources, my parents were making a tangible statement about equality and fairness. "We should have done this years ago," my father admitted. "Your grandfather tried to tell us how our choices were affecting both of you, making Tyler dependent and taking you for granted. It took nearly losing you from our lives to finally understand." I fingered the key pendant, memories washing over me. Childhood summers at the lake house, learning to swim off the wooden dock, reading for hours in the window seat during rainstorms. The property had always represented family togetherness to me, despite the underlying tensions. "Thank you," I said simply. "This means a lot." "There's something else," my mother added. "We've established a separate educational trust for any children you might have someday, the same amount we've set aside for Tyler's son." "Colin is almost 3 now," Tyler explained, pulling out his phone to show me recent photos of my nephew. A tow-headed little boy with my brother's smile and his mother's eyes. "We want him to know his Aunt Rebecca, and we want him to grow up seeing how families should really support each other." The gesture touched me deeply. Not just the financial equality, but the acknowledgement that any future Harlow grandchildren would receive the same opportunities and attention, breaking the pattern of favoritism that had marked our generation. Residency began 6 weeks later, throwing me into a whirlwind of 80-hour weeks, complex surgeries under careful supervision, and the endless cycle of patient rounds. The learning curve was steep and exhilarating, the work both physically punishing and intellectually stimulating. My grandfather's graduation gift, the additional $75,000 he had set aside, allowed me to rent a comfortable apartment near the II hospital, rather than the cramped studio I could otherwise afford on a resident's salary. The proximity meant precious extra minutes of sleep between shifts and the luxury of a proper kitchen, where I could occasionally cook real meals instead of subsisting entirely on hospital cafeteria food. On a rare free Sunday, I invited my parents and Tyler's family to visit my new apartment. Colin raced around exploring every corner while the adults settled in the living room, where I'd hung my great-grandfather's stethoscope in a place of honor beside my framed medical degree. "Becky, what's this?" Colin asked, pointing to a different, framed document on my desk. "That's a very special letter from your great-great-grandfather," I explained, lifting him onto my lap. He was a very wise man who helped me become a doctor. My mother glanced at the framed letter. Grandpa Ellis's trust fund message that had guided me through the darkest period of my family relationships. "You framed it," she observed softly. I read it every morning before I head to the hospital, I admitted. It reminds me why I'm doing this, and how I got here. Tyler approached, resting his hand on his son's head. What does it say? Rather than answering directly, I looked at my family gathered in my living room. The parents who had finally learned to see me clearly, the brother who had grown into accountability, the nephew who represented a new generation with the potential for healthier family dynamics. It says that true family supports each member's highest good, I replied, meeting each of their eyes in turn, and that sometimes the most loving thing we can do for those we care about is to refuse to enable self-destructive patterns. My father nodded slowly, acceptance in his eyes where defensiveness would once have been. Your grandfather always did. Have a way of cutting straight to the heart of things. He would be proud of all of us, my mother said, reaching for my hand. Not just your accomplishments, Rebecca, but how we've all grown. How we found our way back to being a real family. As Colin scrambled off my lap to continue his explorations, I felt a sense of completion that went beyond my medical achievements or financial security. The trust fund that had nearly torn us apart had ultimately forced us to confront and heal the deeper dysfunctions in our family system. Some betrayals, it seemed, created the necessary fractures through which truth could finally enter. 10 years after the trust fund revelation, I stood in the surgical wing of Massachusetts General Hospital, my name now engraved on an office door. Dr. Rebecca Harlow, Chief of Trauma Surgery. The path from first-year resident to department leadership had been demanding but fulfilling, a journey marked by thousands of surgeries, hundreds of saved lives, and countless hours honing my craft. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. Annual family meeting still on for tomorrow? Colin's excited to show you his science project. I smiled, typing back a quick confirmation. The annual family meeting had become our tradition, a weekend at the lake house each summer where we reviewed family finances, discussed upcoming needs or opportunities, and made collaborative decisions about shared resources. What had begun as a necessary healing mechanism had evolved into a healthy practice that kept old patterns from re-emerging. My nephew Colin, now 13, had developed a passion for marine biology after spending summers exploring the lake ecosystem. His science project, a detailed study of microplastic contamination in freshwater environments, had won his school's competition and was headed to the state finals. Dr. Harlow? My assistant knocked on the open door. Mr. Delaney is here to see you. I looked up in surprise. Mr. Delaney from Wells Fargo? Please, send him in. The trust officer looked much the same as he had a decade earlier, perhaps a bit more silver at his temples, but still impeccably dressed, with the same careful precision in his movements. He carried a sleek leather portfolio under one arm. Dr. Harlow, he greeted me, extending his hand. Thank you for making time in what I'm sure is an extremely busy schedule. Of course, I replied, gesturing to the visitor's chair across from my desk. This is unexpected, but welcome. What brings you to Boston? Mr. Delaney settled into the chair, placing his portfolio on his lap. I'm retiring next month after 43 years with the bank. Before I depart, I wanted to personally deliver something to you. He opened the portfolio and removed a sealed envelope, similar to the one that had contained my grandfather's letter all those years ago. Another letter from Grandpa Ellis? I asked, my pulse quickening at the possibility. No, Dr. Harlow. This is from me. He handed me the envelope. Consider it an unofficial addendum to my professional duties as your trust officer. Curious, I opened it carefully. Inside was a single page of high-quality stationery containing elegant handwriting. Dear Dr. Harlow, over my long career in wealth management, I have witnessed countless family dynamics surrounding inheritance and financial transitions. Rarely have I observed a situation handled with the grace and wisdom you have demonstrated. When I first alerted you to the attempted withdrawal from your trust, I saw a young woman facing not just financial betrayal, but the painful recognition of family, patterns that had long diminished her worth. Many in your position would have responded with either destructive anger or passive acquiescence, both understandable but ultimately self-defeating reactions. Instead, you navigated the situation with remarkable maturity, establishing necessary boundaries while leaving room for redemption, protecting your future without permanently severing family ties, and perhaps most impressively, preventing your justifiable hurt from hardening into bitterness. Your grandfather often spoke of your potential during our meetings to establish your trust. "Rebecca sees clearly," he would say. "She has the rare ability to perceive reality as it is, not as she wishes it to be." How right he was. I have taken the liberty of establishing a small scholarship fund in your grandfather's name at Boston University School of Medicine. Each year, it will support one student who demonstrates not just academic excellence, but the kind of character and resilience you have exemplified. The selection committee will include you, should you wish to participate. It has been my privilege to serve as steward of your grandfather's legacy. As I prepare for retirement, I find great satisfaction in knowing that his faith in you was so thoroughly justified. Wishing you continued success and fulfillment, Jonathan Delaney. I looked up from the letter, momentarily speechless. Mr. Delaney, I don't know what to say. This is incredibly thoughtful. He nodded, a slight smile softening his professional demeanor. Your grandfather was one of my most memorable clients, not because of the size of his estate, which was modest compared to many I've managed, but because of his clarity of purpose. He knew exactly what mattered to him and acted accordingly. The scholarship. It's very generous of you. Consider it an investment in continuing the values your grandfather championed. Mr. Delaney adjusted his cuffs slightly. I've observed your family's transformation over these years with professional interest and personal admiration. It's rare to see such profound change in established family systems. It hasn't always been easy, I admitted. There have been setbacks and old habits resurfacing, but we're in a much healthier place now. Indeed. And I suspect much of that is due to your unwillingness to accept either extreme, neither cutting, ties completely, nor returning to dysfunctional patterns. After Mr. Delaney departed, I sat quietly, reflecting on his observations. The trust fund crisis that had once seemed like the worst betrayal had ultimately catalyzed the most important growth in my family's history. Without that painful awakening, we might have continued indefinitely in our dysfunctional roles. Tyler as the entitled favorite, me as the responsible afterthought, my parents as the enabling arbiters of unequal treatment. The next day, as I drove to the lake house for our family meeting, I thought about how far we'd come. My parents, now in their 70s, had finally achieved the retirement security they'd nearly sacrificed for Tyler's brewery schemes. Tyler had developed into a responsible business owner and thoughtful father. His wife Jessica, initially wary of our family dynamics, had become a valued voice in our discussions. And I had built the career my grandfather envisioned, not just professionally successful, but personally fulfilling. The lessons learned from the trust fund betrayal had strengthened my ability to establish healthy boundaries with difficult colleagues and demanding patients, to recognize when helping became enabling, and to value my own needs alongside others. Colin raced down to the dock as I parked my car, waving enthusiastically. "Aunt Becky, you have to see my project. I collected water samples from 12 different points around the lake." I hugged him, noting how tall he'd grown since Christmas. "I can't wait to see it. Let me say hello to everyone first." Inside the lake house, my mother was arranging flowers on the dining table, while my father and Tyler discussed something over coffee. Jessica looked up from her laptop with a warm smile. "The surgeon has arrived," she announced. "Now we can officially begin." My father rose to embrace me. "Rebecca, how was the drive?" "Smooth," I replied, accepting his hug and the mug of coffee my mother pressed into my hand. How are the retirement adventures going? They had recently returned from a month-long trip to Italy, their first significant travel since my father's retirement 3 years earlier. Magnificent, my mother enthused. We brought pictures to show everyone after dinner. As we settled around the large oak table that had witnessed decades of family meals, Tyler distributed folders containing the agenda for our meeting, financial updates, property maintenance decisions, educational planning for Colin. Before we start, he said, unusually solemn. I have something I want to say. He looked directly at me. This marks 10 years since everything changed with the trust fund situation. 10 years since I nearly lost my sister because of my selfishness and our parents enabling. My mother's hand found my father's on the table, both of them listening without the defensive posture that would once have been automatic. I want to acknowledge that formally, Tyler continued. The brewery is successful today because you forced us all to face reality, Becca. You could have just walked away from this family. You had every right to. But instead you showed us a better way forward. The simple acknowledgement, offered without expectation or qualification, felt like the final piece of a puzzle clicking into place. Thank you, I said quietly. That means a lot. Colin looked between us, aware of our family history in the general sense, but not the specific details. Is this about the thing that happened before I was born? The money thing? I nodded. Yes, it was a turning point for our family. Sometimes the hardest moments end up creating the most important growth. Jessica squeezed Tyler's hand supportively. We've talked about making this a teaching moment for Colin, about accountability, consequences, and how to make amends when you've hurt someone. My father cleared his throat. An excellent idea. Colin should understand his family history, both the mistakes and how we've worked to correct them. The conversation that followed was honest, but age-appropriate, with Tyler explaining his past, irresponsibility, and my parents acknowledging their unfair treatment. Colin listened with the serious attention of a teenager beginning to grapple with adult concepts of fairness and responsibility. So that's why we have these meetings every year, he said thoughtfully. To make sure everybody gets treated fairly. Exactly, I confirmed. And to make decisions together instead of some people deciding for others. As the meeting progressed into its regular agenda, I felt a profound sense of completion. The trust fund that was meant to secure my future had done so in ways my grandfather could never have anticipated. Not just financially enabling my medical education, but ultimately healing the family dynamics that might otherwise have remained broken indefinitely. Later that evening, as we gathered on the dock to watch the sunset paint the lake in gold and crimson, I thought about Mr. Delaney's letter and its observation about seeing reality clearly. The skill my grandfather had identified in me as a child had ultimately been my greatest protection. The ability to recognize uncomfortable truths and act on them rather than succumbing to wishful thinking or family mythology. Colin approached, sitting beside me on the dock. Mom says you're going to help pick students for a scholarship at your medical school. That's pretty cool. It is, I agreed. It's named after your great-great-grandfather. The one who wrote you the important letter? That's right. He was a very wise man who saw things clearly. Colin dangled his feet in the water, considering this. Dad says that's what makes you a good surgeon, too. Seeing things as they really are, not how you wish they were. I smiled, touched by the observation. That's a big part of it. In surgery and in life. The sun slipped below the horizon, painting the sky in deepening shades of purple. Behind us, the voices of my family drifted from the house. My mother laughing at something Jessica said, my father and Tyler discussing plans for replacing the dock next summer. The trust fund that was meant to be stolen had instead created a legacy far more valuable than money. A family finally learning to see each other clearly, to value each member equally, and to build relationships based on respect rather than obligation. Some lessons come at significant cost, I reflected. But their value, when properly understood, far exceeds the price paid to learn them. Life has a way of bringing things full circle when you least expect it. 15 years after discovering my parents' attempt to divert my trust fund, I found myself in a situation that tested everything I'd learned about family, boundaries, and true generosity. Colin, now 18 and about to graduate high school, sat across from me in my office at the hospital, nervously fidgeting with the acceptance letter in his hands. "Stanford's marine biology program is exactly what I want," he explained, his enthusiasm battling with obvious anxiety. "But the scholarship only covers tuition, not housing or living expenses. Dad says the brewery can help some, but with the expansion costs this year..." I understood immediately. The brewery was thriving, but Tyler had finally taken the calculated risk of expanding to a second location, a decision our family had discussed thoroughly during last summer's meeting. The timing couldn't be worse for additional educational expenses. "Have you talked to Grandma and Grandpa about this?" I asked, already suspecting the answer. Colin nodded. "They offered to help, but they're on fixed income now. I don't want them dipping into their retirement savings." His shoulders slumped slightly. "I thought about deferring for a year, working full-time at the brewery to save up. The situation struck me with its symmetry, a bright young person with clear academic potential, facing financial obstacles to their education. The parallels to my own story were unmistakable, yet with crucial differences. Unlike my parents' secretive redirection of my resources to Tyler, Colin was approaching the situation with transparency and consideration for everyone involved. "Let me think about this," I said, not wanting to make an impulsive decision. "We'll figure something out before you need to respond to Stanford." That evening, I sat on my condo balcony overlooking Boston Harbor, reflecting on the values my grandfather had instilled in me through his trust and his letter. The purpose of his gift had never been simply financial security, but rather the opportunity to pursue my potential without unnecessary obstacles. The next morning, I called Mr. Franklin, who had replaced Mr. Delaney as my financial advisor when the latter retired. "I'd like to establish an educational trust," I explained, "for my nephew." 2 weeks later, at Colin's graduation party at the lake house, I presented him with an envelope similar to the one that had contained my grandfather's letter years ago. "What's this?" he asked, confused by the formal presentation. "Open it," I encouraged. Inside was a certificate outlining the terms of the educational trust I had established for him, along with a letter explaining its purpose and origin. Colin's eyes widened as he understood what he was reading. "Aunt Becky, I can't accept this. It's too much." "It's not charity," I assured him. "It's investment in your potential, just like my grandfather invested in mine. The only conditions are that you maintain your grades, pursue your passion, honestly, and someday consider doing something similar for someone else when you're in a position to do so." Tyler, reading over his son's shoulder, looked up at me with emotions too complex for words. "Becca, we never expected—" "I know," I interrupted gently. "That's exactly why I wanted to do this. Our family has learned that support doesn't create dependency when it's given with clear boundaries and expectations. Grandpa Ellis understood that. It took the rest of us longer to figure it out." My mother wiped tears from her eyes. "Your grandfather would be so proud of the way you've honored his legacy." "Not just the money," my father added, his voice gruff with emotion, "but the wisdom behind it. Using resources to create opportunity, not dependency." As Colin embraced me with a teenager's awkward gratitude, I felt my grandfather's presence almost tangibly. The trust fund that had once been the focus of family betrayal had transformed into a model for intentional generosity, a cycle of support that strengthened rather than weakened its recipients. Later that evening, as fireflies began to appear around the lake's edge, Tyler joined me on the dock where I sat watching the water. "I never properly apologized," he said without preamble. "You acknowledged what happened," I replied. That meant a lot. It's not the same as saying I'm sorry. He stared across the darkening lake. I was so entitled back then, so convinced that my needs trumped everyone else's. I'm sorry for being willing to take what was meant for your future. The simple apology, offered 15 years after the event without expectation or qualification, felt like the closing of a circle. Thank you, I said quietly. That means more than you know. We sat in companionable silence for several minutes before Tyler spoke again. You know what amazes me most? You could have become bitter or cynical after what happened. Instead, you found a way to take Grandpa's legacy and make it stronger, better. His observation stayed with me long after the graduation celebrations ended, and everyone returned to their regular lives. The trust fund had never been just about money. It had been about values, about seeing potential and supporting it, about family at its best rather than its worst. Now, as I watch Colin beginning his university journey with purpose and confidence, I understand that legacies aren't measured in dollar amounts, but in the principles they perpetuate. My grandfather's gift wasn't the money itself, but the wisdom that accompanied it. Wisdom that guided me through betrayal to boundaries, through hurt to healing, through individual success to genuine family transformation. If you've experienced family betrayal or financial manipulation, know that the path forward isn't always about cutting ties or surrendering your boundaries. Sometimes it's about standing firm in your worth while remaining open to genuine growth and change in those who've hurt you. The truest forms of healing don't erase painful histories. They integrate those experiences into wiser, more compassionate futures. They transform bitter lessons into meaningful legacies that benefit not just ourselves but generations to come. Thank you for listening to my story. If you found meaning or insight in my journey, please consider subscribing to this channel for more perspectives on family dynamics, personal growth, and the complex path to healing after betrayal. Every story shared creates connection and reminds us that even our most painful experiences can ultimately lead to wisdom worth passing on.